The star died in silence. No explosion, no final burst of light across the void. One moment the system's sun burned with the fury of 1 billion years. The next moment it simply stopped existing. 3 billion souls on the world circling that star had perhaps a handful of seconds to understand what was happening before their planets froze solid and cracked apart, like eggs dropped on stone. I watched it happen through the observation dome of the strike cruiser Midnight Blade. My name is Codicier Raizan Dar, Epistolary of the Raven Guard chapter, and I have spent 3 centuries studying the enemies of mankind. I have looked into the minds of heretics and seen the madness of chaos worship. I have touched the thoughts of orc war bosses and felt their simple joy in violence. I have even brushed against the alien consciousness of Eldar farsers and sensed their bitter contempt for humanity. But nothing prepared me for what I felt the moment that star died. It was not psychic energy that killed it. The warp did not surge. Reality did not tear. Instead, something reached out and simply turned off the nuclear fusion at the star's core, like snuffing a candle, like closing a door. The technology required for such an act exists so far beyond human understanding that my mind recoiled from trying to comprehend it. Codicier. Captain Sorek stood beside me, his armor painted black with gray trim, the markings of our chapter barely visible in the dim light. What in the Emperor's name did we just witness? I could not answer immediately. My psychic senses were still reeling from the wrongness of what I had felt. When a star dies naturally, it screams across the warp. Its death is violent, chaotic, full of energy and rage. This star simply ceased. The warp around it showed no disturbance. No souls had time to cry out. They were here one moment, gone the next. Necrons, I said finally. The word tasted like ash in my mouth, but not like any Necron technology I have encountered before. Captain Sorek's jaw tightened behind his helmet. How is that possible? We have fought the mechanical dead before. They have never demonstrated this level of capability. I had no answer for him. The Necrons we had engaged in previous campaigns were dangerous, yes. Deadly warriors with weapons that stripped matter apart at the molecular level. Walking constructs of living metal that regenerated from damage and obeyed their overlords with perfect discipline. But extinguishing a star? That was beyond even what the most ancient records suggested they could do. Perhaps, I said slowly, we have never faced their true power. Perhaps what we have been fighting all these years were just the servants. The foot soldiers. The least of them. The thought filled me with a cold dread that had nothing to do with the freezing void outside our ship. The Nephilim sector had been burning for 6 months when our chapter received the call for aid. Entire Imperial battle groups were vanishing without trace. Worlds were going dark, their distress calls cutting off mid-transmission. The few survivors who made it out told stories that made no sense. They spoke of the dead rising from tombs beneath the surface, of machines that could not be killed, of warriors who moved with impossible precision and weapons that violated the laws of physics. At first, the Administratum thought it was another orc incursion. The greenskins were always a threat in the outer sectors, and their numbers could overwhelm even well-defended systems if left unchecked. But when our scouts investigated, they found something different. The orcs were there, yes, but they were fleeing, running from something they feared more than death itself. That was our first warning that something was wrong. Orcs do not flee. They charge toward death with gleeful abandon. They live for war and die with crude weapons in their hands, bellowing their war cries until their last breath. To see an entire wall broken and scattered, the greenskins abandoning their ramshackle war machines and fleeing into the void, suggested an enemy of truly terrifying power. We found the first tomb world on the 3rd moon of Castron Prime. It was a dead place, Airless and cold, its surface scarred by ancient battles fought millions of years before humanity crawled from the oceans of terror. Our tech marines identified structures that predated the Imperium by epochs. Massive pyramids of black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Obelisks covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes could perceive. Brother Librarian Soren accompanied me on the survey mission. He was young for a librarian, barely a century old, but he had a sharp mind and stronger psychic abilities than most. Together, we approached the largest pyramid, our power armor sensors screaming warnings about radiation signatures and temporal anomalies. "Do you feel it?" Soren asked me through the vox. His voice sounded strained. I did feel it, a wrongness in the warp. A dead space where the Imperium should have touched reality but did not. It was like looking at a map of the galaxy and seeing a hole where a star system should be. The absence was more disturbing than any presence would have been. "This place is anathema to psychers," I told him. "Whatever sleeps beneath this moon, it has been here for longer than our species has existed, and it is beginning to wake." The pyramid opened as we approached. No doors, no mechanisms we could see. One moment, there was solid black stone. The next moment, a passage stood before us, leading down into darkness that our helm lights could not penetrate. The air that rushed out from the opening was so cold it froze the moisture in our armor's respirators instantly. Captain Sorik ordered us to withdraw and call for orbital bombardment. He wanted to destroy the tomb before whatever was inside could fully activate. But I insisted we needed intelligence. We needed to understand what we were facing. The Administratum had already lost 6 battle groups to the Necrons in this sector. Blind aggression had failed. We needed knowledge. So we descended into the tomb. The passages inside the pyramid were vast, built for beings much larger than humans. The walls were covered in more of those disturbing symbols, and as we moved deeper, I began to feel a pressure against my mind. Not psychic pressure. This was different. It felt like being watched by something that existed outside the normal flow of time, like it could see not just where I was, but where I had been and where I would be. Past, present, and future laid out before it like pages in a book. "Codicier," Soren whispered. "My head hurts. It feels like something is pressing against my skull from the inside." "I feel it too," I admitted. "This place is designed to suppress psychic ability, to trap souls and prevent them from touching the warp. Whatever built this feared psychers." We found the first warrior 30 meters below the surface. It stood motionless in an alcove, its skeletal frame gleaming with an inner light that had nothing to do with fire or electricity. The warrior was humanoid in basic shape, but its proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at angles that should not have been possible. In its hands, it held a weapon of elegant design, all flowing curves and geometric precision. Brother Soren raised his bolter, targeting the warrior's skull. I held up my hand to stop him. "It is dormant," I said. "Not dead. Never dead. But sleeping. If we fire, we will wake everything in this tomb." "Then what do we do?" I had no good answer. We were 2 Astartes standing in a tomb that held thousands of these warriors. Perhaps tens of thousands. All of them waiting to wake. All of them equipped with weapons we did not understand and protected by armor that could regenerate from damage. And somewhere deeper in the tomb, something much more powerful was stirring. We withdrew carefully, made it back to the surface without incident. Captain Sorik listened to our report and immediately ordered the entire moon to be virus-bombed. 3 Death Strike missiles loaded with exterminatus-grade biological weapons. Enough firepower to sterilize the moon's surface and boil away its thin atmosphere. The missiles never reached their target. They simply stopped. hung motionless in space halfway between our strike cruiser and the moon's surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, they detonated. The explosions lit up the void like new stars being born. But not a single fragment reached the moon. Something had destroyed them in flight, something with enough power and precision to track multiple hypersonic warheads and destroy them before they could threaten the tomb. "Target lock," one of our bridge crew shouted. Multiple contacts emerging from the moon's surface. Emperor's throne, there are hundreds of them. The display screens lit up with returns. Ships, not ships in the way humans understood them, but vessels of geometric perfection. Pyramids and crescents of black stone, each one radiating the same dead space signature we had felt in the tomb. They moved with impossible grace, gliding through the void without visible engines or thrust plumes. Captain Sorik ordered battle stations, ordered all ships in the battle group to form defensive formation. But even as we moved to engage, I knew it was already too late. We had poked a sleeping giant, and now it was waking up. The Necron vessels opened fire first. Their weapons made no sound in the void, but the effect was obvious. Green beams of light that moved too slowly to be lasers, but somehow crossed the distance between ships in heartbeats. Where the beams touched our shields, the energy fields simply ceased to exist. Not overloaded, not burned through. They just stopped being there. The beams passed through our armor next, and wherever they touched, matter came apart. Not melted or vaporized. It just separated into its component atoms and drifted away like dust. The strike cruiser, Eternal Vigil, was hit first. A beam passed through its hull from bow to stern, and the entire ship came apart like a sandcastle hit by a wave. 1,700 souls died in the span of a single breath. I felt them go, their souls crying out as they were torn from their bodies. The psychic echo of so many deaths at once made me stumble, even through the protection of my psychic hood. "All ships withdraw," Captain Sorik was shouting into the Vox. "Fall back to minimum safe distance and prepare for warp translation." But the Necron ships were not letting us flee. They moved to cut off our escape vectors with a coordination that suggested a single intelligence controlling all of them simultaneously. No human fleet could achieve such perfect formation flying. It would require thousands of calculations per second and near instantaneous communication between ships. These were not piloted by living beings. These were machines following programming laid down millions of years ago, and they were devastatingly effective. We lost 3 more cruisers before we made it to minimum safe distance for warp jump. I watched them die on the tactical displays, each one a glowing dot that flickered and went dark as the Necron weapons found them, each one representing thousands of lives extinguished, each one a failure that would weigh on my soul forever. The navigator managed to punch us through into the warp. The Imperium welcomed us with its usual chaos and madness, but after what we had just faced, even the warp felt safer. At least here the rules made some kind of sense, even if that sense was insane and ever-changing. Captain Sorik called a council of war in the Strategium. The survivors of our battle group attended via hololith projection, their faces grim and exhausted. We had gone into Castron Prime system with 15 ships. We were leaving with 8. Nearly half our strength destroyed in a single engagement that had lasted less than an hour. "Options," Captain Sorik said bluntly. "We cannot fight them directly. That much is clear. So what do we do?" Lord Admiral Traskrin of the Imperial Navy spoke first. "We call for reinforcements. We request an entire battle fleet to return to Castron Prime and properly cleanse the tomb world. With enough ships and proper orbital bombardment, we can bury them beneath a mountain of rubble." "That might work if we were only dealing with one tomb," I said. "But what if there are others?" "The Nephilim sector spans dozens of systems. How many of them have moons or dead worlds that might house Necron tombs? How many have already awakened? The question hung in the air like a curse, because we all knew the answer. If the Necrons had been sleeping in this sector for millions of years, there could be hundreds of tomb worlds, thousands even, and if they were all waking up simultaneously, no amount of Imperial firepower would be enough to stop them. Brother Captain Marin of the Dark Angels spoke next. His image flickered on the hololith, his face hidden behind the bone-white helmet of the Deathwing. We need intelligence more than firepower. We need to understand what woke them, what they want, why they are attacking Imperial space now after sleeping for millions of years. I agreed with him. Blind violence had achieved nothing. We needed to think like the Raven Guard. We needed to strike from the shadows, gather information, identify weaknesses. Fight smart rather than fight hard. There may be another option, I said slowly. Ancient records in the Librarius make reference to a Necron leader, a king of some kind. If we can identify this leader, we might be able to understand their strategy, perhaps even negotiate. Captain Sorek laughed. It was a bitter sound. Negotiate with machines, with the dead. They have no souls, Codicier. They are not alive. What could we possibly offer them? Survival, I said. If the records are accurate, the Necrons were once a living species. They transformed themselves into machines to escape death. Perhaps some of them regret that choice. Perhaps they want to become flesh again. If we can identify those among them who are open to negotiation, we might avoid a galactic war. It was a thin hope, but it was the only hope we had. The Conclave agreed to my plan. We would split our forces. Half would return to Imperial space to request reinforcements and report what we had discovered. The other half, including myself and Captain Sorek, would remain in the Nephilim sector and attempt to gather intelligence. The next 3 months were the most terrifying of my life. We played a game of cat and mouse with the Necrons, jumping from system to system, staying just ahead of their expanding sphere of control. We watched entire worlds go dark as the mechanical dead rose from tombs buried beneath cities that had stood for 10,000 years. We saw Imperial Guard regiments annihilated in battles that lasted mere hours. We recorded every detail, every tactic, every weapon system the Necrons employed. And slowly, a pattern emerged. The Necrons were not just attacking randomly, they were securing specific systems that had nothing in common on the surface, but when I plotted them on a star chart, I saw something disturbing. They formed a rough sphere with empty space at its center. Space that contained no stars, no worlds, no natural matter at all. Just a void where the galaxy itself seemed to thin out. "What is that?" Captain Sorek asked when I showed him the chart. "I do not know," I admitted. "But whatever it is, the Necrons want to protect it. Or perhaps they want to use it. Either way, it represents their primary strategic objective." We designated it the Void Sphere and began monitoring Necron activity around its perimeter. And that was when we first heard whispers of the Silent King. The name came from intercepted communications between Imperial forces. A Space Wolves pack had engaged a large Necron force on the world of Barris III and had been completely wiped out. But before the last Wolf brother died, he had transmitted a final message. His words were broken, distorted by whatever had killed him, but certain phrases came through clearly. Not like the others. Intelligence commands them all. The Silent King. The Silent King returns. I played that transmission 17 times. Each time I heard those final words, I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with temperature, the way the Space Wolf had said it. The terror and awe mixed together in his voice. He had not been afraid of death. Space Wolves mock death. They welcome it with songs and battle cries. But in those final moments, that warrior had encountered something that shook him to his core, something that made even a son of Russ afraid. I dove into the librarious archives, searching for any reference to a Necron king. The records were fragmentary and contradictory, many of them dating back to the Great Crusade or even earlier. But certain details appeared again and again. A leader who commanded absolute obedience, a strategist who thought in time scales beyond human comprehension, a being who had made a deal with gods and then killed those gods, a king who had condemned his own species to eternal undeath and carried that guilt for millions of years, and most disturbing of all, a consciousness that had remained aware and sane throughout 60 million years of isolation. 60 million years. I tried to comprehend that time scale and failed. Humanity had only been a species for perhaps 200,000 years. The Imperium itself was only 10,000 years old. But this Necron king had been conscious and thinking for 60 million years. How could any mind survive that long without breaking? What did the universe look like to something that ancient? What did humanity look like to a being that had watched whole galaxies rise and fall? We would not have to wait long to find out. The attack on Meridian came without warning. We had thought the system was safe, protected by void shields and a substantial garrison of Imperial Guard, 3 regiments supported by armor and artillery, fortifications that had withstood Orc invasions and Chaos raids, orbital defense platforms that could crack battleships. None of it mattered. The Necron fleet materialized in systems so close to Meridian Prime that our sensors barely registered them before they were in firing range. Not just a few ships this time. Hundreds of them, a vast armada of geometric vessels that moved with predatory grace. At the center of the formation was something different, larger than the other ships, but not by much. What made it stand out was not its size, but the way it moved. While the other vessels followed predictable courses, this one seemed to drift as if its captain was taking time to observe the battlefield before committing to action. I watched it through the observation dome of the Midnight Blade, watched as it glided through the orbital defenses like they did not exist, watched as it reached the planet's surface and hovered above the largest Imperial fortification, a fortress monastery that housed the 17th Meridian Armored Division. Then I saw him. The distance was too great to make out details with normal sight, but my psychic senses, already stretched thin by the oppressive null field that surrounded all Necron technology, caught something. A presence. Not a soul, because the Necrons had no souls, but a consciousness, a will, an intelligence so vast and ancient that it made my mind reel from the sheer weight of it. And in that moment, the fortress monastery ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not bombed, it simply vanished. One moment there was a structure 5 kilometers wide and 2 kilometers tall, housing 60,000 soldiers and 3,000 armored vehicles. The next moment there was empty ground, perfectly smooth as if the fortress had never been there at all. Not even rubble remained. The Necrons had not torn it down or blown it up. They had edited it out of reality. "Emperor's mercy," Captain Sorek whispered beside me. "What kind of weapon can do that?" I could not answer. My mind was still trying to process what I had witnessed. This was beyond anything we had seen before. This was not advanced technology. This was something that violated the fundamental laws of reality. You could not simply remove matter from existence. Energy had to go somewhere. Mass could not be destroyed, only transformed. These were basic principles of physics that even the most exotic weapons respected. Except apparently the Necrons did not respect those principles. They simply ignored them. The battle for Meridian lasted 7 hours. 7 hours during which the Imperial Guard fought with courage and desperation against an enemy that could not be killed. 7 hours during which 3 regiments of humanity's finest soldiers were methodically dismantled, their weapons proving useless against armor that regenerated from damage and warriors that stood back up after being blown apart. I watched soldiers empty their laser guns into Necron warriors, at point-blank range and saw the warriors simply absorb the hits and keep walking. I watched a Leman Russ battle tank score a direct hit with its main cannon, blowing a Necron warrior to fragments, only to see those fragments crawl back together and reform. I watched sergeants order their men to fix bayonets and charge in melee, desperate to achieve something, anything, against an enemy that felt no pain and knew no fear. They died brave, they died fighting, but they died nonetheless. By the end of those 7 hours, the 17th Meridian Armored Division had ceased to exist. Not fled, not routed, ceased. There were no survivors. The Necrons had killed them all with cold efficiency. And then, as the last human life winked out, the Necron fleet simply left. Lifted off from the planet's surface and glided back into orbit as if nothing had happened. As if the total extinction of 60,000 souls had been a minor inconvenience barely worth noting. I felt those deaths through the warp. 60,000 screams cut short. 60,000 souls torn from their bodies in fear and pain. The psychic echo of so much death nearly knocked me unconscious. My psychic hood overloaded, smoke rising from its circuits. I collapsed to the deck of the observation dome, blood running from my nose and ears. When I finally regained consciousness, Captain Sorik was kneeling beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "Codicie, can you hear me? Rizan, answer me." I tried to speak and found my throat too dry, managed to nod instead. Sorik helped me sit up, careful not to jar my injured head. "What happened?" he asked. "You collapsed as if struck." But we detected no weapons fire. "Death," I whispered. "So much death. All at once." The psychic backlash nearly burned out my mind. Sorik's expression darkened. 60,000 guardsmen. Gone. Just like that. And we could do nothing to save them. I forced myself to focus through the pain. It was not random slaughter. The Necrons were not there to conquer. They came, destroyed the fortress, killed everyone inside and left. This was a demonstration, a message. A message to whom? Us? No, to their own kind. The other Necron tomb worlds in this sector. I managed to get to my feet, though I had to lean on Sorik for support. They were showing the other Necrons what they are capable of. Establishing dominance, proving their right to command. You think there is a hierarchy? That they are fighting among themselves? "I think," I said slowly, "that we just witnessed the Silent King making his return known. And every Necron lord in the Nephilim sector now understands exactly what will happen to them if they do not bend the knee." The name became more common after Meridian. Survivors from other battles whispered it. Intercepted Mechanicus data streams mentioned it. Even the Eldar, those arrogant Xenos who barely acknowledged humanity's existence, seemed to know about the Silent King. We captured an Eldar ranger on the world of Castus 7 and brought her aboard our ship for interrogation. She laughed when I asked her about the Necrons. "You Mon-K are so blind," she said in her musical voice. "You see the warriors and think them dangerous. You see the ships and think them powerful. But you do not see the one who commands them, the one who shaped the galaxy itself, long before your species learned to use fire." "Tell me about him," I demanded. "Tell me about the Silent King." Her laughter died. For a moment, I saw real fear in her alien eyes. "He is older than my species. Older than the old ones who created us. He walked the galaxy when it was young and green, when gods ate stars and reality itself was still cooling from its birth. He made a choice that damned his entire species, and he has lived with that choice for longer than your mind can comprehend. You ask me what he is. He is regret given form. He is guilt made immortal. He is a dead king ruling a dead empire, and he will not rest until either his people are restored or the galaxy itself ends." "How powerful is he?" She looked at me like I had asked how powerful the sun was. Power is the wrong word. He does not have power. He is power. He commanded gods. He killed gods. He tore apart the very beings that your chaos worshippers fear and scattered their fragments across the galaxy like toys. He ordered his people to sleep for 60 million years, and they obeyed. He destroyed the very mechanism that gave him control over his species, chose exile as penance, and still, when he returned, they followed him, because they remember what he was, what he is, what he will always be. She paused, her eyes distant. My people fought them. In the war in heaven, when the galaxy burned and reality itself screamed, we saw what they could do. We saw them extinguish stars with a gesture. We saw them crack open planets to mine the core. We saw them build weapons that could kill you before you were born, reaching back through time to edit you out of history. And at the center of all that horror stood the Silent King. Not the strongest of the Necrons, not the most skilled in battle, but the one who commanded the strongest, the one who wielded armies of the unkillable like a sculptor wields clay. We feared him more than we feared their weapons, because weapons can be destroyed. But him, he simply will not stop, cannot stop, will continue until either he achieves his goal or the heat death of the universe finally ends his existence. I let her go after that conversation, released her back to her craft world with a warning to stay out of Imperial space. She left without argument, seeming almost grateful to escape the Nephilim sector. I could not blame her. Every day we remained in the sector felt like tempting fate, like standing at the edge of an abyss, knowing that one wrong step would send us tumbling into darkness. Then came Zendu. We picked up the transmission by accident, a brief burst of data in a frequency that should not have existed. The mechanicus tried to decode it and found nothing but noise, but I felt something in that noise. A pattern, a purpose. I took the data to my meditation chamber and spent 3 days in psychic trance, trying to understand what I had sensed. On the 3rd day, I understood. It was not a message meant for humans. It was not even a message meant for beings with souls. It was pure mathematical data, coordinates and timestamps, a meeting. Zendu, I told Captain Sorik when I emerged from my trance. The tomb world of Zendu. Something is going to happen there. Something important. The Necrons are gathering. How do you know this? I felt the anticipation. The excitement is the wrong word. The Necrons do not feel excitement. But there was a sense of significance, of importance. Whatever is going to happen at Zendu, it matters to them in a way that our battles do not. Captain Sorik considered this. Could be a trap. Possibly. Probably. But if the Silent King is going to be there, if we can observe him directly, the intelligence we could gather would be invaluable. So we went, took the Midnight Blade and 2 escort frigates, jumped into the Zendu system at the very edge of sensor range and deployed a network of sensor probes. Then we waited. 3 days later, they came. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands. They materialized in system in perfect formation, each one positioned with geometric precision. Not just ships, but entire tomb worlds lifting off from planets and moons. Pyramids the size of continents gliding through the void on technology that made Imperial anti-gravity look like children's toys. At the center of the formation, I saw something that made my breath catch. A vessel like nothing in our records. Larger than a battle barge, but smaller than a battleship. Its hull was not the black stone of normal Necron ships, but gold. Pure, glowing gold that seemed to shine with its own light. And atop this vessel, visible even at extreme range, stood 3 figures. The Silent King. I could not see details at this distance, but I did not need to. The weight of his presence was like a physical force pressing against my mind. Every Necron in the system was oriented toward him. Every ship, every warrior, every consciousness bent in his direction like iron filings near a magnet. He spoke. I do not know how I heard him. There was no Vox channel, no psychic transmission. The Necrons had no souls and could not use the warp. But somehow, his voice reached me, reached every living being in the system. A voice like the grinding of continents, like the death of stars, ancient beyond measure and heavy with the weight of 60 million years of memory. Children of the infinite empire, you have slept long, you have dreamed deep, but the time for sleeping has ended, the time for dreaming is past. Our enemies multiply. The Tyranids come to devour the galaxy. If they succeed, there will be no flesh left for our restoration. No bodies to house our consciousness, no future but eternal undeath. This I will not permit. This I cannot permit. So rise now. Rise and remember what we were. Remember what we can be. Remember that we ruled the stars when the universe was young. Remember that we shattered gods and made reality itself bow to our will. We are the Necrons. We are eternal, and we will have our flesh back, no matter how many stars must die to achieve it. The communication ended, but its effect was immediate and obvious. Every Necron ship in the system activated simultaneously, millions of warriors waking from their sleep, entire tomb worlds coming back to life after 60 million years of silence. I felt it through my psychic senses, not as souls waking because the Necrons had no souls, but as a stirring in the material realm, a shift in reality itself as technology beyond comprehension began to operate. Like watching a machine the size of a galaxy turn on after aeons of inactivity. Every gear meshing perfectly, every component functioning exactly as designed. No rust, no decay. Just perfect mechanical efficiency, preserved across timescales that made human history look like the blink of an eye. We need to leave, Captain Sorek said urgently. If they detect us, they already know we are here, I interrupted. I could feel it. Feel him. The Silent King's consciousness sweeping across the system, cataloging every ship, every sensor probe, every living being. His attention touched our vessel for a fraction of a second. It felt like being examined by a cold, vast intelligence that saw me not as a person, but as a data point, a variable in an equation spanning millions of years. Then his attention moved on. We were beneath his notice, insignificant, less than insects to a being that had commanded armies in the war in heaven itself. Somehow that was more terrifying than being targeted for destruction. We fled Zendu, jumped into the warp, and did not stop running until we reached the edge of the Nephilim sector. Only then did Captain Sorek allow the navigator to rest. Only then did we dare to transmit our findings back to Imperial Command. The response came within days. Lord Commander Militant Erasmus himself wanted to speak with me. His hololith appeared in the strategium, his face grim beneath his ceremonial helmet. Codicier Da, I have read your reports. I have reviewed your sensor data. I need to know, in your professional opinion as a librarian of the Adeptus Astartes, what level of threat does this Silent King represent? I took a breath before answering. Chose my words carefully, knowing that what I said next might shape Imperial policy for decades to come. My lord, I began, I have spent 3 centuries studying the enemies of mankind. I have seen demon princes tear apart battle tanks with their bare hands. I have watched hive tyrants coordinate swarms of 1 million creatures with a single will. I have fought orc war bosses whose belief in their own invincibility made them nearly immune to damage. But the Silent King, he is different. He does not rely on physical power or psychic might. He relies on something more dangerous, which is time, memory, perfect strategic planning executed across millions of years. My lord, Imagine an enemy who remembers every mistake they ever made, who never forgets a lesson, who can wait centuries for the perfect opportunity to strike, who thinks not in terms of battles or wars, but in terms of galactic epochs. That is what the Silent King represents. He is not just powerful, he is patient, and that patience is backed by technology that can extinguish stars, weapons that can edit reality, and an army of unkillable warriors who obey his every command. Lord Commander Erasmus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy. Can he be defeated? I do not know, perhaps, but it would require resources on a scale we have never committed to a single conflict. It would require the full attention of the Imperium, multiple space marine chapters, entire battle fleets, perhaps even a Primarch. You think he is that dangerous? I thought about what the Eldar Ranger had told me, about a being who had killed gods and scattered their fragments, who had commanded his entire species to sleep for 60 million years and been obeyed, who carried the guilt of transforming his people into machines, but remained sane and purposeful despite that burden. My lord, I said quietly, I think he might be the most dangerous enemy the Imperium has ever faced, not because he wants to destroy us, but because we are simply in the way of what he wants, and beings who have existed for 60 million years do not let obstacles stop them. They simply wait for those obstacles to turn to dust. And compared to his time scale, that is what we are. Dust, here for a moment and gone, while he continues forever. The Lord Commander dismissed me after that, said he would confer with his advisors and decide on a course of action, but I could see in his eyes that he understood. The Imperium had faced many threats: chaos, Tyranids, orcs. But this was something different. This was an enemy that predated humanity by millions of years, that possessed technology we could barely comprehend, that thought in timescales beyond our ability to imagine. How do you fight an enemy who can wait you out, who will still be here long after your civilization has fallen and your species is extinct? The answer, I feared, was that you did not. You survived as best you could, and you prayed to the Emperor that the Silent King's goals did not require humanity's extinction, because if they did, there was nothing we could do to stop him. Months passed. The Nephilim sector burned. World after world fell to the Necron advance. The Administratum mobilized everything they could spare. More Space Marine chapters arrived. The Imperial Guard committed dozens of regiments. The Adeptus Mechanicus deployed their most exotic weapons. None of it mattered. Every battle we fought, we lost, sometimes quickly, overwhelmed by sheer numbers of Necron warriors. Sometimes slowly, worn down by an enemy that did not need to eat or sleep or rest. An enemy that could fight for months without pause, while our soldiers grew exhausted and our supplies dwindled. And behind every defeat, I could feel him, the Silent King. Not present personally, but his will was there, his strategy, his planning. Every Necron move was part of a larger pattern that I could sense but not understand. Like looking at a tapestry and only seeing a few threads. I knew there was a greater picture, but I could not see it. Then came the day that changed everything. A signal reached us, not transmitted through the warp, not sent via Vox. It simply appeared in our cogitators as if it had always been there. A set of coordinates, a date, a time, and a message in perfect High Gothic. Come alone, Codicier, Ryzan Dar of the Raven Guard. We would speak with you. Captain Sorik forbade me from going. Said it was obviously a trap, that I would be killed or captured. That we could not afford to lose a senior librarian to Xeno's treachery. I went anyway, took a Thunderhawk and flew to the coordinates alone. A dead moon in an uninhabited system, no strategic value, no resources, nothing that would interest the Imperium or the Necrons, just a cold ball of rock floating in the void. I landed on the surface and waited. He came at dawn, though there was no sun to create dawn on this airless moon. But somehow the horizon grew bright. Golden light spilled across the dead stone, and in that light I saw him. The Silent King stood 3 meters tall. His body was not the skeletal construct of normal Necron warriors, but something more ornate, more detailed. His necrodermis chassis was inscribed with symbols that seemed to move when I looked at them directly. On his head sat a crown of living metal, and in his hands he held a staff that radiated power I could feel even without psychic sight. Behind him floated a platform of gold and black stone. 2 other Necrons stood on that platform, flanking the Silent King. His triarchs, his advisors, his companions across millions of years, they did not move or speak, simply watched me with glowing eyes that held no mercy and no malice, just cold calculation. The Silent King stepped forward. His movements were fluid, graceful, nothing like the mechanical rigidity of normal Necrons. He moved like he remembered what it was to have flesh, to have muscles and joints that bent with organic motion. After 60 million years as a machine, he still remembered what it was to be alive. Rysendar. His voice was not spoken aloud. It appeared directly in my mind. Not psychic, something else, something worse, like my own thoughts rearranging themselves to form his words. You are curious about me, about my power, about what I am capable of. So I have brought you here to answer your questions. I tried to speak and found my throat closed by fear, forced myself to breathe, to remember my training. I was a space marine, an Astartes, a warrior of the Imperium. I would not show weakness before this Xenos, no matter how ancient or powerful. Why? I managed. Why tell me anything? Because you will carry the message back to your masters. You will tell them what you learned here, and they will understand what we are, what I am. And perhaps, if they are wise, they will stay out of our way. You could just kill me. Yes, the word was simple, final, but that would teach you nothing. And I need humanity to understand, need your Imperium to comprehend what it faces. So I will tell you a story, Rysendar, a story of power, of choices, of consequences that echo across eternity. He gestured with his staff, and the dead moon around us changed. Not physically, but I saw something, visions, memories, his memories, shared directly with my mind. I saw his people as they had been, the Necrontyr, frail beings with short lives, ravaged by radiation from their dying sun. I felt their desperation, their rage at the Old Ones who refused to share the secret of immortality, their determination to find another way. I saw the Satan, vast beings of living energy that fed on stars. I watched the Necrontyr give them physical form, trap them in bodies of necrodermis, watch them make a deal, immortality in exchange for service. I saw the biotransference, billions of living beings walking into machines that stripped away their flesh and uploaded their minds into mechanical bodies. I felt the Silent King's horror as he realized too late what he had done, that his people's souls had been consumed by the Satan, that they were now hollow things, immortal but empty, living but not alive. I saw the war in heaven, battles that spanned galaxies, weapons that violated reality itself. I saw the Satan revealed as the parasites they were, feeding on the Necrontyr's stolen soul. I saw the Silent King's rage, his betrayal, his revenge. I watched him lead the Necron revolt against their gods, watched them trap the Satan in tesseract labyrinths, watched them shatter the star gods into fragments and scatter those fragments across the galaxy. Watched the Silent King himself drive his staff through the heart of a Satan and listen to it scream as it died. Power, such power, Technology and will combined to kill beings that should have been immortal and invincible. The Silent King had not just fought gods, he had won. But victory had cost him everything. His people were saved from the Citan, but they were still machines, still empty of souls, still trapped in metal bodies that would last forever but feel nothing. And he knew it was his fault, his choice, his failure. I saw him order his people to sleep, saw him destroy the command protocols that let him control them absolutely, saw him choose exile as penance for what he had done. 60 million years alone in the void between galaxies. 60 million years with nothing but his guilt and his memories and his determination to fix what he had broken. Then I saw why he returned. The Tyranids, vast swarms of biological horror flowing toward the galaxy. If they arrived and consumed all life, there would be no bodies left for the Necrons to transfer into, no hope of reversing the biotransference, no chance of redemption. So the Silent King came back, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to preserve, to protect the very species he needed to save his own people, to fight a holding action against an enemy that could not be reasoned with or stopped, only slowed, delayed, bought enough time to find a solution. The visions ended. I found myself on my knees, gasping. Tears streamed down my face, though I did not remember starting to cry. My mind felt stretched like a cloth pulled too tight. I had just experienced 60 million years of memory compressed into moments. And somehow I had survived it. Barely. "Now you understand," the Silent King said. "Now you see what I am. Not just what I can do, but why I do it. I do not hate your species, Ryzandar. I do not wish humanity harm, but you are in the way. Your Imperium occupies worlds I need. Your battles damage tomb worlds I must preserve. Your existence consumes resources I require, so I will remove you, not with anger, not with pleasure, simply because it is necessary." I looked up at him, met those glowing eyes that held millions of years of memory. "You will fail. The Imperium is vast. We are billions of worlds, trillions of souls. You cannot defeat us all. I do not need to defeat you all. I only need to outlast you. Your Imperium is 10,000 years old. In galactic terms, that is nothing. A heartbeat, a breath. I was ancient when your Emperor was born. I will be here when your Imperium falls. I will be here when your species is extinct. I will be here when the last star in the galaxy grows cold and dies. Because I am eternal, and you are not. That is the difference between us. That is why I will win." He turned away, began walking back toward his platform. His triarchs had not moved during our entire conversation, had not spoken, had simply watched with cold, mechanical patience. "Wait," I called. "Why tell me this? Why show me your memories? What do you want from me?" He stopped, did not turn around. "I want you to tell your masters the truth. Tell them that I am not their greatest enemy. The Tyranids are. Tell them that I will hold the Nephilim sector because I must, but I have no interest in expanding further into Imperial space. Tell them that we could be allies against a common threat, or we could be enemies in a war neither of us can afford. The choice is theirs, but they should choose wisely. Because I am patient, and humanity is not." Then he was gone. The platform rose into the sky, silent and graceful. The golden light faded. I was alone on the dead moon with my thoughts and memories of what I had seen. I returned to the Midnight Blade, reported everything to Captain Sorik. He listened in silence, his face growing darker with each word. "Do you believe him?" he asked when I finished. "Do you think he would be willing to ally with us?" "I do not know, but I believe he was telling the truth about his goals. He does not want conquest. He wants survival for himself and his species. And if we stand in the way of that survival, he will remove us without hesitation or remorse. then we are already at war. Yes, a war we cannot win through strength of arms. Our only hope is to give him what he wants, or at least to stay out of his way while he gets it himself. Captain Sorek shook his head. The Administratum will never accept that. To give up even one system to the Xenos is heresy. To allow the Necrons to operate freely would be to betray everything the Imperium stands for. Then we will fight, and we will lose. Slowly, painfully, inevitably, we will lose. Because you cannot defeat an enemy who has already survived for 60 million years, who has killed gods and shattered stars, who thinks in timescales we cannot imagine and remembers every mistake he has ever made. How do you defeat perfect memory backed by infinite patience? There was no answer to that question. We both knew it. The Imperium would fight because that was what the Imperium did. We would throw regiments and fleets and chapters at the Necron advance. We would kill millions of their warriors and lose billions of our own people. We would fight with courage and faith and desperation. And in the end, we would lose. Not because we were weak, not because we lacked courage, but because we were facing an enemy who had already won, who had survived the war in heaven, who had killed gods and conquered death itself, who had made the choice to condemn his entire species to eternal undeath and still found the strength to seek redemption. The Silent King was not the strongest being in the galaxy. The Emperor was surely more powerful. The Chaos Gods commanded forces beyond comprehension. Even some of the greater Tyranid bioforms might surpass him in individual combat. But in terms of actionable power, in terms of the ability to achieve strategic objectives across timescales spanning millions of years, the Silent King was perhaps unmatched. He combined ancient technology with perfect memory, personal combat ability with strategic genius, political authority with scientific knowledge, and all of it backed by the patience of a being who had waited 60 million years and could wait 60 million more if necessary. How do you fight that? How do you defeat not just a warrior or a general, but the embodiment of an entire civilization's will to survive? A civilization that had already survived the death of their gods, the loss of their souls, and millions of years of sleeping darkness. You do not, you cannot, you simply pray that his goals do not require your extinction. And you hope that when the final reckoning comes, when the Tyranids arrive in force and the galaxy burns, the Silent King will remember that conversation on a dead moon. Remember that humanity offered alliance. Remember that we could have been friends rather than enemies. It is a thin hope, but it is the only hope we have. Because the Silent King is coming. His tomb worlds are waking, his armies are rising, his plan, laid millions of years ago and executed with perfect patience, is finally reaching fruition, and we are just obstacles in his path. Dust waiting to be swept aside. Here for a moment, and gone. While he continues, forever. The Emperor protect us all. In the end, what I learned during my time in the Nephilim sector can be summarized simply. The Silent King is not the most powerful being in the galaxy in terms of raw force. He cannot match the Emperor's mastery of the warp. He cannot compete with the reality-warping powers of the Chaos Gods. He may not even be the strongest individual Necron, as some of his overlords have spent their 60 million years of sleep experimenting with powers he forbade. But power is not just strength. Power is the ability to achieve your goals, to make the universe bend to your will, to take an objective and make it reality, no matter how many obstacles stand in your way. And by that measure, the Silent King may be the most powerful being in material space. He commands technology that can extinguish stars and edit matter out of existence. He leads armies of warriors that cannot truly be killed, only temporarily disrupted. He thinks in timescales that make human civilization look like the flicker of a candle. He has killed gods. He has survived for 60 million years without losing his sanity or his purpose. He has maintained a goal across that entire impossible span of time and is now, finally, in a position to achieve it. That is power. Not the brute force of a demon prince or the psychic might of an Eldar farseer, but the power of will sustained across eternity. The power of purpose that cannot be broken or diverted. The power of a being who has already lost everything and therefore has nothing left to fear. I have seen wonders in my 3 centuries of service to the Emperor. I have watched librarians split the earth with their minds. I have seen dreadnoughts tear apart battle tanks with their power fists. I have witnessed titans stride across battlefields like gods of war made metal. But nothing has inspired in me the sheer existential dread I felt standing before the Silent King. Because all those other wonders were temporary. They existed in the moment. They could be destroyed, or defeated, or outlasted. The Silent King cannot be outlasted. He is the one doing the outlasting. He was here before humanity existed. He will be here after humanity is gone. And in the time between, he will pursue his goal with patience and precision that we can barely comprehend. Lord Commander Erasmus asked me to assess the threat level, to give him a number, a ranking, something concrete he could put in reports and use to justify requisitions. I told him this: if the Imperium focuses every resource on stopping the Silent King, we might succeed. Might, but it would require multiple chapters of Space Marines committed for decades. It would require fleet assets on a scale usually reserved for crusades. It would require the personal attention of the Adeptus Mechanicus and possibly even a Primarch. And even then, we would not defeat him. Not truly. We would simply force him to withdraw, to wait, to plan for another approach, because he has time, all the time in the universe, and we do not. So the question is not, can we defeat the Silent King? The question is, can we afford to try? And the answer, I fear, is no. We cannot spare those resources, not with the Tyranids advancing from the eastern fringe, not with chaos spreading from the Eye of Terror, not with Orcs and Dark Eldar and 1,000 other threats pressing on the Imperium from all sides. We are fighting a war on every front, bleeding ourselves dry against enemies that outnumber us and outgun us. We do not have the luxury of focusing on a single threat, no matter how dangerous. So we will do what we always do. We will fight where we must. We will hold what we can. We will sacrifice millions of lives in the Emperor's name, and we will pray that it is enough. But in the dark hours of the night, when I am alone with my thoughts, I know the truth. It will not be enough. The Silent King is coming, slowly, patiently, inevitably, like a glacier grinding across the landscape, like the rotation of the galaxy itself, massive and ancient and impossible to stop. And when he arrives, when his full power is brought to bear, when the tomb worlds wake and the Necron Empire rises again in all its terrible glory, we will learn what it means to face an enemy that has already conquered death itself. The Emperor protects. But even the Emperor cannot protect us from time. And the Silent King has all the time in the universe. That is his true power, not weapons or technology or armies, but time, perfect, patient, eternal time. And we are running out of it.